Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown! Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one! Another one!
Huge hole! He's at the 30! He's gonna go! 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor!
Galloway finds Rob Finnessy, who fires the three, and he hit it!
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. Welcome in, of course, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios mobile unit, as we are at BB's Market here in Bloomington, of course, where we come each and every Friday. Part of the Endeavor Hospitality Network, one of our great sponsors of the wealth of family of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area, like BB's or Feast, Market and Cellar, Southern Stone. They have their own beer with Metalworks Brewing Company, which supplies all the places as well. So, and much, much more. Make sure you stop in when you can. Also, we're powered by Andy Moore Honda, Bloomington. Andy Moore. Just go to andymorehonda.com and get more to your door. How's everything doing today? It is not a great day weather-wise, but we knew that was coming, and that's not going to be good for the women. I wonder if they will still run that. But right now it's not bad at all. I mean, it's just wet. So I was thinking it was going to be raining the whole time. When I heard the forecast for this area, it was at least for over an inch of rain. It's supposed to rain from 4 a.m. to 11 tonight, but it's not raining now. So cool. Everyone wants to know about recruiting, of course. Not a lot moving within on the outside. What's going on underneath? We're not all positive about, as that has moved around quite a bit. On the program today, Alec Busse will join us, and we'll talk specifically about IU recruiting, where they are, where do they go. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star will also join us, and we'll talk about not just that, but more like yesterday, our conversation. Where is Indiana on the recruiting hierarchy tree right now still? I would have thought, and it's not because this has nothing to do with the history even. I mean, just the history itself, yeah, it's Indiana, and Indiana is always going to be Indiana. But okay, let's take it for the value of that. It's been kind of devalued in the eyes of a lot of the recruits. Let's just, for argument's sake, take that. But it's still it still has so many more positives and resources than other schools that they're still losing out to. It makes you wonder. So we'll talk about that with Zach as well. Dylan Sinn should be joining us as well from the Fort Wayne Journal and Gazette. Looking forward to that. Hello to everybody listening on, if you're on radio, of course, our good friends down, our River Rats down in near Evansville on 97.7 ESPN. Always the right call, the ref. Appreciate you guys, everyone listening down there. Or on radio up in the northwest corner and in Chicago on 12:30 a.m., 104.7 FM, WJOB. Our region rats, appreciate all you guys. Hope you're having a great day. Or out our other stations in Southern Indiana, 89.9 WBRO. So wherever you are, however you're listening, a lot of people on YouTube from all over the world. We appreciate you guys. John in Cincinnati. Rob is in Springville, Indiana. Hope that's... I do not know where. Thank you, John. John Pence asking, where is Springville? I do not know where that is either. Just a nice little town. It's 18 miles south of Bloomington. So, hey, he's right down the road. So, wow. So Springville must be, but what is that? Like just south of Mitchell, home of Chase Briscoe. in it, NASCAR star. Robbie Phillips. Appreciate everybody on board. A lot of guys. Pete. Shakopee, Minnesota. Minnesota, eh? Shakopee. Kent up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Man, you guys are all over. We appreciate you. Fred's the Easton Assassin in Easton, Pennsylvania. Hope everyone's having a great day. It is a rainy Friday, but that's okay. We're going to have a little of that. It's just been tough because the weather, you can't say it's been great because there have been great days, but man, 2 times in a row now, we've hit the 80s, and then it has off the cliff to the 50s for the next 2 days again, which is what is expected to happen. But this is probably, well, no, I better not say that. I was going to say probably the last time. Won't say that at all. You know, on the sports calendar, besides we'll be talking about basketball, of course, but you look at the sports calendar coming up, there's a lot of stuff, and that we'll be looking to cover for you and to actually be there live. Starting with, and coming up soon, I'm trying to get my calendar pulled up. There we go. 2 weeks from now is the Kentucky Derby down in Louisville at Churchill Downs, and Indiana Sports Beat will be there for you. Bring some unique aspect from the back row. We'll be back where the barns are, walking around, and just it's a great scene. If you haven't been there, if you haven't seen it, been part of it, it's wild. People are out there, and I mean from sun up. It's hard for me to get there that early, but to check it all out. But I will do that. Looking forward to it. So then you have the Indianapolis 500 coming up as well. So we got all that and more. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Alec Busse is going to join us. We're going to talk about some Indiana basketball recruiting. What's next? Where do they go? Plenty more. We're here at BB's Market. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Wow, you made it up.
I did, yeah. John and I were
I bet you hate that. I keep forgetting, man, about that hour.
Yeah, I mean, I was planning to get up early anyway today because I was recording a podcast, or I'm recording a podcast with Jason. Right after my hit here, we were going to start recording at 8 Central, 9 Eastern. So it ended up not being a big deal anyway with the time change. But yeah,
you guys ought to be really good on that together, because last year I love Keegan to death, but he doesn't have his on-camera persona yet. But Mason is just, especially for a writer, most writers aren't great on camera. For a while, Mason is just very fluid.
Yeah, he's been really impressive to me so far, and I'm excited to hopefully get to work with him a little bit more. This
Congratulate
summer.
him. He just received, I saw 4 days late, but the Bob Jenkins Memorial Scholarship from IU Media School.
I saw that. Yeah, that was why he wasn't able to go to the spring game.
I wish he would have told me that, just so I could. Yeah, I didn't even know anything about it. That's cool as hell.
Also, just a FYI, last name is pronounced Busse.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. I just caught it there right as you went off from the last segment. I was like, oh, let's get that right.
And there was someone the other day that had the same spelling, and they did say it like you just said it.
Yeah, it's different. I believe it's.
I just went with Busse just because of what's his name?
Gary
Busse. Yeah.
That's what most people assume it is from the start. So it's.
I would have. And if it was me, I would have used it just because of that. Yep, that's my cousin.
All right, you guys go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, April 20th, I believe. I hope I'm right with that. 21st, it looks like. Now, the month is flying away. Alec Busse joins us now from thehoosier.com. Not a lot going on, but a lot going on. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, I'm going to imagine, Alec, with IU basketball, because they're kind of in I don't want to say a panic mode after losing out on Chris Liedlam, but it wasn't. I don't know how good of a shot that they really had. I know that they went all in on him, but it was never seeming to lean toward Indiana.
Yeah, I think they lost a lot of momentum after his visit to Indiana. And like I said previously on the show, Jim, transfer recruitments are a lot different than high school recruitments. A lot of times in transfer recruitments, you really want to try and lock down a commitment shortly after a player visits a school. And you want to do that just because you want to be able to make sure you can get them before they go to the next place, because players generally, I think, in the transfer portal have a better idea of what they're looking for, or have a better understanding of the things that they're trying to find at their next destination. And I think when you allow a transfer recruitment to go on a little bit longer than you would maybe like to, in a lot of cases, it maybe doesn't go in your favor. So they lose Chris Ludlam to Tennessee. I had sources telling me that his visit down there went very, very well. He obviously enjoyed it enough to commit shortly after his visit to Tennessee. And then a little bit further, it just seems like Tennessee's coaching staff put in a ton of effort and really made Liedlam a huge priority for them. And props to Tennessee for bringing in a pretty good player. He averaged about, I believe it was like 19 points and about 8.5 rebounds a game last season for Harvard. Not a prolific three-point shooter, but certainly someone who can step out and knock a couple down a game. And I would imagine that his percentages get a little bit better at the SEC level, just as he plays with more space, assuming that Tennessee's offense is a little bit more competent this next upcoming season than it was this past season. But yeah, certainly a loss for Indiana and Mike Woodson. And I think they're, like you said, they're not at a point where they need to panic with some of their transfer portal targets coming off the board to other schools, whether that's Liedlam or L. Ellis going to Arkansas, or now even Cormac Ryan committing to North Carolina as of yesterday. So I don't think it's time to panic by any means, but it's certainly time to start to pivot and go to some other options that they maybe have identified, or just kind of keep waiting out guys who are declared for the NBA draft, who obviously will have a decision to make if they want to stay in or return to college basketball. And I think the decision date for that is May 31st.
Fred points out that Missouri picked up Caleb Grill from Iowa State, along with they've got Tamar Bates, and Missouri doing a great job. There's other schools that are just kind of hitting it. And once again, I don't want to say Indiana. I'm not judging because I do not know what's going on behind the scenes at the moment and how it's going to end up. But and yes, I know that they picked up Khalil Ware, which was a nice pickup. But I don't know that he is as important of a pickup as what they still need in shooting, because what they still need is something they have needed for 8 consecutive seasons. And they've had what they picked up, and Khalil they already had, and they have had for those 8 seasons. This portion that has just been missing from the Indiana offense, from the Indiana attack, that shooter that Indiana has been known for decades. And yet there are so many of those in Indiana high school that end up at other places. And I'm just starting to wonder, is Indiana just chasing? Are they chasing the wrong guys sometimes? I know you don't get everybody, but when you really go all in on somebody, you're kind of running a risk again. And when you do that and fail again, this is not the first time. So it starts to put something in your mind. Okay, Indiana is just not getting the top guys. And yeah, I know that they have not won like Indiana used to win, but there's these other schools that have never won and that are being able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And I look at Indiana as someone that they were set up for NIL as far as returning to their former level of play. There's no other program that was probably set up to return better than Indiana because of the resources, because of there's no state that produces the talent that Indiana does, because of the NIL that they have set up with Hoosiers for Good that is very, very solid. And yet it's still a head scratcher.
Yeah, I think that transfer recruitments are really hard to kind of fully understand and maybe understand why players go to certain schools. And you mentioned NIL being a really big factor. That's no secret that NIL is a big deal in the recruitment of college players. And I think the best example of that might be Hunter Dickinson's transfer recruitment right now. From everything that I've kind of heard, it's essentially kind of just like a bidding war right now. And
it's a what?
It's a bidding war right now for Hunter Dickinson between Georgetown, Maryland, both of those schools being close to home. I've seen Kansas obviously be pretty involved. He's planning a visit to Kentucky, I think.
And if Maryland were to get him, that would, to me, make them the. And I've said I'm out of the prediction game, but if Maryland were to get Hunter Dickinson, to me that makes them the Big Ten favorite, de facto Big Ten favorite going into next year over Purdue.
Yeah, it's definitely them or Purdue, assuming that Edey comes back to Purdue out of the NBA
I don't
draft,
think he's leaving.
Maybe isn't a full guarantee. I've had people tell and indicate to me and have read that Purdue's really doing a good job of trying to put together an NIL package to get Edey back. But
it also depends on how he performs at the combines. If he goes there and all of a sudden they're like, hey, man, maybe there is a spot for this dude. Maybe he does some things that we haven't seen.
Yeah, and Jim, I think his role at the NBA level is a little bit different than some of the other bigs that we've seen in college basketball the last couple of years that have been really dominant, right? Like Kofi Cockburn, Armando Bacot, and he's coming back to North Carolina for another season. Hunter Dickinson, Oscar Tshiebwe, all those guys are your pretty stereotypical big. And I know that Zach Edey is, but Zach Edey is 7'4". Those other guys that I mentioned are large humans, but in comparison to who they're on an NBA court with, they're really not that much bigger. Like a lot of NBA players are over 6'8", 6'9", right? Not very many NBA players are taller than 7 foot or 7'1" on a very common basis. And
because there aren't that many of those guys.
Yeah. So while Edey plays a lot like a lot of those other bigs have in college basketball, he's still 7'4". He's going to be the biggest person on every single NBA court unless he's matched up against Boban Bogdanovic. Now, at the same time with Edey, he's probably not going to play a ton of minutes at the NBA level ever, just because that's not where the game's at. It doesn't suggest playing with a 5-man who can't handle, who can't guard ball screens, who can't space the floor. Now, Edey, I do think, is a pretty decent passer, something that he's certainly gotten better at, and he's a good free throw shooter. So he does have some things working for him to his favor. But, at the end of the day, too, he's still a 7'4" big, and that's not really where the NBA is kind of trending. But back to what you were kind of talking about, Indiana and their transfer portal recruitments and some of the needs they have, shooting is something that I think every school needs. And I think it's something that every school kind of desires and is looking for in the transfer portal. And it's just really hard to find. Generally speaking, college kids aren't very good shooters. They're just not. It's just not something that they've developed at a high level consistently very often, I don't think. And I think
that didn't used to be the case. We used to see guys that were just so much better. But I think part of that is because is it that too many guys it's just the three or nothing? The mid-range game has kind of disappeared.
Yeah, that might be part of it. I also just think that players have gotten to a point in their development where they're so much more athletic than the players that they're often playing against growing up that they're able to get to the rim at a higher level. So they're able to finish at a high percentage on shots right at the rim, which allows them to kind of score that way in high school and in AAU. Whereas then when they get to the college game, you're not going to be that much better than your opponent on a one-on-one matchup base on a consistent basis. So then it forces you to kind of learn how to shoot. So I think some of the players that we maybe see don't have the elite athleticism or don't have the ability to play above the rim on a consistent basis, don't have some of the elite shooting capabilities. I think of someone like Miller Kopp, just to use an Indiana example, right? Like Miller Kopp's a good athlete. He's certainly not an elite athlete. He's not someone who is going to blow past the defender. He's not someone who's going to throw down windmill or 360 dunks. But he's someone who can dunk. He's someone who can kind of handle and run the floor, good athlete. But what made Miller Kopp a good college basketball player for 4 or 5 years was that he was a good shooter. And I know he passed up a lot of open shots this past season for Indiana, much to the chagrin of Hoosier fans. But he was someone who's a good shooter. He understood his role. And I think there's less and less guys like that because kids are generally getting better and better at basketball. And that means everything else but shooting, I think, right now. And I do think there's certainly still kids out there who can shoot that are in the transfer portal. But just as a rule of thumb, like college kids just aren't as good at shooters as NBA players. It's one of the reasons they're in college, right?
Yeah. West Virginia, and not that we need to talk about them, but Philip.
I would love to talk about West Virginia, actually.
They have, what the hell? They are loading up like they're going to war, man, and they're getting what's Bob Huggins pulling out of his back pocket all of a sudden? Are they coming up with some big NIL money because they are loading? All right, West Virginia is a perfect example. West Virginia is not the bastion of college basketball, but they've been competitive. Well, they have Bob Huggins. They have the coach. It's like, Duke under Krzyzewski or Indiana under Knight or, whomever. When you have that consistency of winning, and West Virginia they have not been elite, but they've been uber competitive. And to pick up those pieces like they did, Kirk Krisa, man, that's gigantic ad. And then they've added Syracuse big man Jesse Edwards. And they're looking tough next season already.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as high on them as you are, actually. I kind of think it's a weird fit, and it's a weird, it's a weird fit for Bob Huggins. Like, Kirk Krisa doesn't fit Bob Huggins, I don't think. He's not – he doesn't have the Bob Huggins, it factor of toughness and, grittiness.
How many surprises you, man? He's foreign. He's one of those foreign guys.
I love Kirk Krisa. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Because I find him to be incredibly entertaining. And I know that is a huge, I'm in a huge minority there. I know a lot of college basketball fans don't like him because of the way he plays and he talks trash and he has all these antics and whatever else. But I just love to be entertained, and he does it better than anyone. But he doesn't necessarily fit like Bob Huggins. And if you kind of look at some of the advanced numbers for Kirk Krisa, he is in the under 50th percentile in both the overall offensive and defensive player, according to Synergy. So he's kind of right in the middle. And I also think he's really kind of benefited the last 2 seasons at Arizona of playing with one of the best teams of the country. Obviously, the 2022 Arizona team was the #1 overall seed, had a couple NBA draft picks on there with Christian.
They probably should have won a national championship with the talent they had on that team.
I loved that Arizona team. And then this year they were a good team. I don't think they were as good this season. Obviously, they were a 2 seed. They get upset by Princeton in the first round, but they had 2 really good bigs with Azuolas Tubelis and Omar Ballo, and they had some other good pieces as well. But I think losing Krisa isn't necessarily the biggest hurt for Arizona. They're really high on Kylan Boswell. He's someone who reclassed and was a freshman at Arizona last season. He'll be a sophomore this upcoming year. But I do like the addition of Jesse Edwards. He's a good player, and I like the way that pairs with Trey Mitchell in the front court for Coach Huggins at West Virginia. You got 2 athletic guys who can kind of space the floor, can run the floor, play above their rim, can handle, and should have some good versatility defensively, especially Edwards. He's a really good shot blocker. So I like the additions of what they're doing, but at the same time, they play in the Big 12, which is the best league in the country, or has been for the last couple of years here. And I don't know if they're really separating themselves to be at the top tier of the league. I look at what Kansas has kind of been attached to. Obviously, like I said, Hunter Dickinson, Arterio Morris has been attached there. They just got a guard from Townsend, I believe, yesterday or a day before that was regarded as one of the better additions in the portal. And it's Kansas, right? Like Kansas basketball is inevitable, as I've been told, living in Kansas for the last 7 or 8 months. And then Houston coming to the league as well. They'll be good. We know Baylor's a good program now. And then I also think it's hard to not kind of trust the talent that Texas is going to have. They just always seem to have good talent. So give props to West Virginia for what they've added and for what they continue to kind of target in the transfer portal.
The Big 12, there's a reason you hear the Pac-12 whining, moaning, just bitching and moaning about USC and UCLA leaving. And I know that that's a blow. I get it. But what the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma. Sure that they didn't like it at first and they made their feelings known, but what have they done since then? They've just moved forward. They've gotten other teams to come in. They are, I don't know how much this is going to sound stupid, but I don't know how much they're going to miss Texas and Oklahoma once they keep things going, because they are elevating other programs in basketball. Look at Kansas State. The NIL has been able to, boom, raise schools up. Even in football, they've got, and look, West Virginia is one of those teams in basketball, but even football, Oklahoma State, TCU, they've got teams there, and they're fun to watch. Hell, TCU was in the damn playoffs, in the college football playoffs. So, man, I like the fact that they lost their 2 biggest jewels, but yet they're just moving forward and maintaining things. But I know you're very, very familiar with that, but the Big 12 has just been to me, man, I don't know if they're the second best overall conference or not. It should be an argument. You take the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12, but man, which been so good on both sides. Of course, the SEC dominates football. Big 10 has some dominant football programs, but I don't know. The Big 12 is right there.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my 1 year in the Big 12. And covering Big 12 football and basketball, especially Big 12 basketball, is a ton of fun. And I'm obviously really excited to get back to the Big 10 just because it's a conference I grew up in and watched more closely. But like the Big 12, I think what the Big 12 has going for them that the Big 10 and the SEC will not have and probably will never have is that there isn't going to be a dominant football or basketball program. And well, Kansas, obviously basketball-wise. But speaking more towards football, there's not going to be a really dominant program that kind of runs the conference for a really long period of time. Like we saw Ohio State do in the Big 10, or like we saw Alabama do in the SEC, and like we could be seeing Georgia do now in the SEC as well. And I think what that creates is a really, really entertaining brand of football, because every single week, Team A can beat Team B, or Team 1 can beat Team 8, or Team 8 can beat Team 2. And that makes it really, really fun to follow and to watch, because games are always competitive. You don't know who's going to win every week. You've got betting spreads that are always seeming to be under 6.5 points and all those other things. And that does make the Big 12 really entertaining. You mentioned how you don't think the Big 12 is maybe too sad or upset that they're losing Texas and Oklahoma. I think from what I observed from like a day-to-day operation of the league, Texas kind of ran the league, and Texas kind of did what Texas wanted to do, and everyone kind of followed suit. So I think from that standpoint, a lot of schools in the league are maybe excited that Texas is leaving the Big 12 and took Oklahoma with them. But at the same time, I think losing those 2 schools certainly does hurt Texas, or certainly does hurt the Big 12, because those schools brought in a lot of revenue. And we kind of see that with the money that they're going to be bringing into the SEC. The SEC is going to be getting a fairly similar share of revenue that the Big 10 is getting in their next meter rights deal. And the Big 12 is only going to be around like $30-ish, $35 million annually for each school. So financially speaking, losing those schools definitely hurts the Big 12. But from a pure like entertainment standpoint, yeah, the Big 12 is awesome. It's been the best basketball conference the last 3 or 4 years. It's produced a couple national champions in basketball, and its football conference and landscape is going to be awesome with UCF and Houston and BYU and Cincinnati coming into the conference. And I think it just joins a really fun and entertaining league of Kansas State, like you said, Oklahoma State. Iowa State's a program that's been better under Matt Campbell football-wise, and Texas Tech is a program that I'm high on, and Baylor seems to kind of win for a while. And you mentioned TCU playing in the CFP and eventually the national.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about the Big Ten style of play. I'm almost tired of hearing about it, but there is something there, obviously. And the change, it's not – we saw Indiana and how they recognized the athletic difference. And is that something that is across the board in the Big Ten? We'll talk about that. And where does Indiana go next specifically? Who are they talking to? We'll talk about that as well. Alec Busse from thehoosier.com with us right now. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle,
totally cool.
Presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
No, I wanted to talk about this comment from this guy. I'm not a fan, and I'm not sure what you mean by winning a 3-point contest. Indiana hasn't hardly been able to hit a 3-pointer, much less win a contest. The only contest they've won in the last 6 years, 3-point contest, has been at Hoosier Hysteria when they kick off the season and compete against themselves.
You're going to that. Oh.
Whenever he gets back, I'm going to have to count you guys in just so you know.
Sounds good.
A week ago.
Okay. We go live in 5, 4,
Sorry, we got to do it in a minute.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, April 21. It is a rainy one, but that's okay. April showers bring May flowers, right? Welcome, everybody. Jim Coyle coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios mobile unit here at BB's, as we are each and every Friday, part of the Endeavor Hospitality wealth of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area, joined by Alec Busse from thehoosier.com. And first of all, there was this Jiwoo commented on the Andy Moore Honda hotline that says maybe a fan's like me wants to win a 3-point contest. Jiwoo, first of all, I'm not a fan. I don't approach this as a fan. What I say is just my opinion on things. So, boy, got a phone call coming in. Line 1 ringing, the bat phone. But, Indiana, if Jiwoo or anyone else thinks Indiana is not in desperate need of shooting, then I think we've been watching a different team over the last couple of seasons. But back to that, where does Indiana go now, Alec? They also saw that Cormac Ryan, who I thought that they would try to get in on quickly since he's close in proximity, but saw that he is potentially already committed to North Carolina.
Yeah, Cormac Ryan committed to North Carolina yesterday. He's someone that I wrote about on the Hoosier. I believe that would have been on Wednesday, or Tuesday, I guess it was, that he was written about on our website as a potential target for Indiana, someone that they were linked to. Someone they've also been linked to a little bit here recently is Matthew Cleveland, Florida State transfer. He was a former 5-star, top 20, top 25 national recruit in his class. He averaged about 14 points a game last season for Florida State and is a good shooter. Shot about 35% from the perimeter, about 7.5 rebounds a game. But he took a visit to Missouri starting yesterday, I saw reported as well. So they're certainly out there kind of expanding their net with guys like Matthew Cleveland, who entered the portal, I want to say, a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. About Cormac Ryan was someone that they had been linked to a little bit, not a ton. L. Ellis, another one I talked about a little bit earlier that they were linked to, but ended up not getting. He commits to Arkansas, even though he seemed like he wanted to be in the NBA. And they're expanding their net. I just think the targets are maybe just not known right now. And I think that that's kind of the reality of the situation. I know that's how it is at other schools, just with things that I've heard and things that I've seen reported by other people, is there's targets that schools know that they're probably going to get or have a good chance of getting that just haven't entered the transfer portal yet, whether that's because they haven't made that decision to do so yet, or it's because that they're declared for the NBA draft and haven't announced that they're coming back to school. So I just don't necessarily know who their targets are right now. I know that they like Matthew Cleveland, like I said, former 5-star talent. He'd be the second one that they add this offseason if they were to get Cleveland. But again, he just took a visit to Missouri starting yesterday, I think it was. So he's someone I would kind of keep an eye on, see if they're able to get him on campus. I'm sure you've talked about Dalton Connect a good bit. I just don't think they're going to get him on campus at this point. They've been trying for a really long time. He seems to really like Oregon. He just took a visit to Tennessee, was there with Chris Bedlam. At one point, he had a visit planned with Washington, I believe, and I haven't seen him finalize that. But I know Oregon is sitting in a really good spot with Dalton Connect as well from Northern Colorado.
And while they were able to secure Khalil Ware from Oregon, by chance, that was obviously, to me, an opportunity of him looking at saying, hey, I'm going to replace Trace Jackson Davis. And everyone saw the attention that Trace Jackson Davis received nationally. There was no question about that. He got the attention. You can get the attention at Indiana. That there's no doubt about that. But from a guard standpoint, yeah, I know that Jalen Hashafino's going to be an NBA pick, but guess what? He was already going to be an NBA pick. I don't care if he had played at Indiana University Southeast at New Albany. He was going to be an NBA pick. So I don't know if people look at Indiana as producing that guard to the NBA, if you know what I mean. Trace Jackson Davis, a different situation, but the guards, that's the issue that Indiana is having. And again, it's something that they never had before. You go back to Tom Crean, he always had shooting guards, guys that can light it up, whether it was James Blackman Jr., Jordan Halls, Victor Oladipo became a hell of a shooter. Just shooters. He had shooters, a plethora of shooters. Their defense was a little lacking, of course, but they're not even close to getting what they need offensively right now. And with that many open spots still, you start to wonder, all right, how much are they looking to depend upon what they already have? Whether it's Caleb Banks or the guys coming off the bench, but they're going to have to fill those spots. And I'm not saying that they can't leave one open, but just getting back to an unusual position when you have open scholarships, if that ends up being the case.
It's certainly tough to fill a roster, and I think that losing Tamar Bates hurt, and I think that losing Jordan Geronimo hurt. Not that Geronimo played a ton, but I think you could maybe hope that he would take a step. I know Tamar Bates was fairly inconsistent this past season for Indiana, and I think losing someone that you can kind of count on to give you a few buckets a game hurts, especially when they were just a sophomore, and you can kind of hope that they take a bigger step between their sophomore and junior year than they maybe did between their freshman and sophomore season. So they certainly have pieces to fit. I know that they like some of the kids that they have coming in. offensively, with Gabe Cupps primarily in that kind of conversation. But it'll be interesting to see who they end up getting in the portal. And I think they're banking on Xavier Johnson getting a waiver from the NCAA, an injury hardship waiver. And I think that you can have expectations that that's going to happen, but I wouldn't, if I was Indiana, I wouldn't be not communicating with guards that are potential transfers or guys that are declared for the NBA draft who might come back to school and enter the transfer portal, because I think that Xavier Johnson is 100% going to get the waiver. That's like not how the NCAA works with the waiver situation, especially with the redshirt ones that they give people. They're inconsistent. There's seems to be no rhyme or reason why certain athletes.
Well, we just saw who was it? Baker, Joey Baker.
Yeah,
his was denied by the NCAA, so his college career is over. But the difference, as I pointed out, he was trying to get back a year from 5 years ago, because the last 4 years he averaged 30 games a year. Playing in. So as opposed to Xavier Johnson, who is trying to get his last year back, number one, but also if you look back during his other 4 years, he didn't average that many games, 30, and there was the 20 season, I think he only played 16 or 18 games. But I agree with you, and I've said this multiple times. There is no rhyme or reason to what the NCAA has done in the past. Now, they're under new leadership. Does that change? They know that they know and have to know that they need a personality transplant, so to speak, with the public perception, because nobody trusts them. They look at them as a joke, and that has to change. You cannot have the governing body of the biggest sporting. I mean, college sports is bigger than the NFL. It's bigger than Major League Baseball because it encompasses so much more and encompasses the entire country. But you cannot have a sports body like that governed so weakly.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Baker coming in as the new president here replaces Mark Emmert, who I think everyone kind of decides wasn't very good at his job, wasn't very well liked. Charlie Baker, I believe, is a former governor or some sort of politician from Massachusetts, I think is where he's from. I know that he was a politician up there in the Northeast. I just forget what state and what his specific role was. I'm actually really intrigued to see how that kind of goes and everything else in the country just at this point in time, or not in the country. I'm just really intrigued to see that, like, the direction the NCAA takes on a lot of topics moving forward, just because I think that it's at an inflection point. They're facing a ton of legal cases about the status of college athletes and whether or not that they're going to be considered employees of the university, whether they should get a cut of revenue distribution. There's a lot of things with going on with the NCAA and college sports that is a lot bigger than just the transfer portal and the day-to-day rules that operate college sports that people have come to know over the last however many years. So those are certainly things that Charlie Baker and his new team of people and the decision makers, the transformation committee, the D1 council, all those things kind of need to kind of put together and really modernize and make college sports more equitable, I think, for all people involved, because for the longest time, the people who put the product on the field, the court, whatever surface that was being played on, were the ones who were getting nothing out of it. They were just playing for the love of the game and amateurism, which patently just like doesn't exist in my opinion. Like, just because you call someone an amateur doesn't mean that's what they are. Like, I don't know. I don't know where you sit on the amateur thing, Jim, but like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't know. Like, am I an amateur writer when I'm in college? No. Like, I don't know. So you put all those things
they were always considered amateurs, and
they still are,
in essence. Yeah, they still are to me as well. Just because you're getting paid now does not mean that you're not an amateur. Being paid does not make you professional, I can promise you, because there are a lot of people that can get paid that are far from professional, that are far from the professional level in any way, whether it's performance or or your background, et cetera, et cetera. I mentioned earlier I wanted to talk about style of play in the Big Ten. We hear about that so much, and I'm having a hard time buying that, because winning is winning is winning. We see Big Ten teams in preseason playing different tournaments, different games. Purdue last year, who they beat? Gonzaga. They beat two or three teams.
Maybe Duke and Gonzaga.
Beat Duke. So I just, that style of play crap doesn't fly with me, because the Big Ten used to be dominant. They just aren't. They just haven't been. Indiana has been not Indiana. Indiana was in a Final Four in 2002. Probably should have been in 1 and 13. They were the number one seed. Would have been the number one overall seed if they hadn't lost to Michigan at the end of the season. Had 2 top 4 draft picks. That's an elite team right there. And they won the Big Ten tournament, or a Big Ten conference, in 2016 with another team that was very good. The style of play is not it. There's too many players that are good, and too many teams that are good, and they just get beat. Winning a national championship is hard, for one thing, but not having the Big Ten, not having Indiana being Indiana over these last 25 years is a part of that. You have to look at the ACC. Without Duke and North Carolina, the ACC is not really the ACC if those two schools are not doing well. And they weren't. And last year, the North Carolina was terrible, and Duke was okay, and the ACC was the 7th ranked conference in the country, which is unheard of. But yeah, the style of play, I'm just not buying that is why they lose in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I actually do buy it quite a bit more. And I think a lot of it dives a little bit deeper than just the style of play. I think it has to do with like the talent accrual. If you look at like the top 100 recruits and where they went in the 2020 class, 23 of them went to the ACC. Another 23 went to the SEC. The Big Ten only got 12. In the 2021 class, it's kind of a similar distribution. The ACC got 16, the SEC got 18, the Big Ten got 15, and the Big East got 15 as well. And then if you kind of look at the 2022 class, so kids who are freshmen this past season, 23 of them go to the ACC again. The SEC gets 25 top 100 recruits, and the Big Ten gets 16. So they're not recruiting at the level that the ACC or the SEC does. So that kind of leads to those conferences just having more talent. And when leagues have more talent, they're likely to have better players, and better players is going to transfer to better wins. And then if you kind of look at it a little bit further, I think that the Big Ten struggles with guard play quite a bit. And what wins more than anything in the NCAA tournament is quality guards. And this last season, we were talking about like Busse and Chase Adij being like two of the top like 5 to 7 guards in the Big Ten. That says a lot about the guards that existed in the Big Ten this past season, because Busse and Chase Adij, they had a really good year for Northwestern. They got him back to the NCAA tournament for the 2nd time in program history. But like, we know what those guys are. We know that they're not great players. We know that they're not elite players. Tyson Walker, AJ Hoggard at Michigan State, people thought really highly of. Like, you drop those kids in the Big 12, like, they're not anything special. You drop those kids in the SEC, they're not going to be anything special either. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not like super high on this Michigan State team coming back next season, is that I just don't think that those kids are that great. Like, you can be really good in comparison to your direct peers in the Big Ten at the guard position, but you're maybe not going to be great in comparison to the guards that are existing in the rest of the country. So I think that that's part of it. But then also I think that the way the Big Ten plays is kind of easy to defend and kind of easy to neutralize. You basically have 14 schools that kind of play the same style, except for Penn State this past season. They played a little bit differently with more space and more shooting and an up-tempo kind of style. That's something that Illinois wanted to do, but they ended up ditching it because they didn't feel like it was working midway through the season. you see a lot of schools play the same style of basketball with a big anchored to the paint that isn't super skilled, that can't space the floor, oftentimes isn't a great passer, that struggles defensively to cover ball screens in different actions because they just don't move super well. I think that those things become easy for opponents in the NCAA tournament to take advantage of. You just have to put guys on a ton of ball screens. You just have to put those bigs in ball screens and kind of take advantage of it. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit cynic, but we're looking at 3 NCAA tournaments now in a row where the Big Ten has really struggled. They haven't had a team in the last 3 Final Fours, I don't believe. They only had one team make it to the second weekend this past season, and that was Michigan State. And I don't think anyone's talking about this Michigan State team this past season as a world beater program. I mean, they were a 7 seed and they were 11-8 in a really down and really bad Big Ten. So I do kind of buy some of the style of play things, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, to talent accrual, talent retention, but then even one step further, just getting good guards, because it's something that the league has really struggled for a long time, and guards are about winning college basketball.
There's no doubt about that. Scott says we really shouldn't say that they couldn't hit 3-pointers because they shot them at a decent percentage. They just didn't take very many 3-pointers. He's saying that they had a high percentage. Well, that's part of the reason they had a high percentage, Scott, is because they didn't. They didn't shoot. I've said it so many times on here. They were in the top 20 percentage in the country of 3-point shooting. Yeah, but they were also in the last 20% of attempts. So that number is going to come much closer to each other. The more shots you put up, that percentage would have gone down, I assure you. Trey Galloway was not confident in shooting, although he was shooting very well. But I'm really starting to wonder. I don't think Miller Kopp was a lack of confidence. So both of these guys, I'm really starting to wonder, was the offense so, and I think the answer is yes, it was so driven between Jalen Jafino and Trace Jackson Davis, and anything else was accidental, in essence. Any other scoring was purely ancillary and accidental. That it was AB, Jalen Jafino and Trace Jackson Davis. Anything else, accidental. So you can't have an offense like that, because that was what Purdue had. And unfortunately for them, their guards were not experienced enough. So they didn't have, their AB was not a very strong AB. Now it'll be stronger next year, but that's the difference to me. But I think that I don't know. It would have been interesting to see, Alec, if they had run a different offense, if they had given more shots.
Has Jim frozen on us, Alec?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I don't hear him.
Okay.
Did you hear him?
Well,
Sorry.
Well, we need to take a break anyway, so this would be a good time to take a break. So
okay,
we'll
sounds
be
good.
back with more after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
So this will give him some time.
RC, do you know if he wants me back for another segment, or am I free to go and get working on some other stuff today with other people?
On the schedule from John, you are sorry, for the final update, it looks like you are good to go because Zach is supposed to hop on at 6:30.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Good to see you, Alex.
Yep, you too. Have a good one.
You too. Bye. Hey, Zach. I think Jim's having some technical difficulties, so we're waiting for him to get back on.
Sorry, what's up? I had you on mute for some reason. Sorry, no, stop.
It's okay. I said I think Jim's having some technical difficulties, so we're waiting for him to log back on.
Gotcha. Okay. Mo, no.
We're back.
All right. Here he is. So we can go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, April 21. It is Little 500 weekend this weekend in Bloomington. Zach Osterman from Indy Star joining us now. It's not going to be a beautiful weekend. It's supposed to rain today here all day, Zach, which does not make for a fun Little 5 for the women if they have to race in that, depending upon, I don't know, if it got bad, maybe they would reschedule for tomorrow morning. You'd know more about that. Zach has long been involved, raced in, and has competed in, and has been involved with the Little 5 still. Who are you involved with, Zach?
Phi Kappa Psi.
And what capacity do you do?
I guess
this is year-round stuff for people, though. Good thing that I'm glad Dustin. I wish Dustin Schutte was on today. First of all, he calls it the bicycle movie. But regardless, the Little 5 is just a tradition that has been going on for so long, but it's an awesome race. But it is a year-round thing, man. These guys got to stay in shape, train the teams and all of that. And so I sorry to interrupt you there, but so what is it that all you're able to do now?
Yeah, so I'm essentially, I guess probably the best word would be assistant coach. We don't think about it that formally, but I have a friend who rode for Phi Psi in college. I rode for a different fraternity at the same time he did. He is their primary coach, but he lives in Minnesota, and so he asks me to just kind of be a resource for the guys closer to home, and somebody to bounce ideas off of and things like that. And, it's fun it's a fun way to stay involved in what is a really cool event.
It absolutely is. And while I don't think it's going to rain on Saturday for the men's race, it's going to be chilly for certain. The temperatures yesterday, we had a high of 80 something. And then of course, for the second straight week, the roller coaster hit the top, and today rain in 50s, and tomorrow high of 54. But that's probably an optimum temperature for racers. I would imagine that's probably on the bottom end of the optimum temperatures, but that's probably not going to bother them at all.
Yeah, you'd probably we'd rather it be like mid-high 60s into the 70s. Just the ability to stay warm, to stay loose. So
it affects the guys that are not racing probably more than the guy is actually racing at the time.
Right. I mean, Little 5 is distinctive as a cycling event because it's all interval work. You go hard for a few minutes and then you get off the bike and, listen, you can stretch in the pit, you can spin, we'll have their bikes set up in the pit, they can spin on them, but there's such an element of sort of, warm up and cool down within the race itself, that if it's already cold outside, it's harder to keep those muscles stretched, and it's harder to keep those muscles just kind of going. And so that's where I think, sorry, we got my puppy in here with me and he is being rather mischievous, but that's where probably we'd like it to be just a little bit warmer, just a little bit more, a little bit, further up the temperature scale. But It's the same race. It's the same weather for everybody. You just have to race through it.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier with Alec Busse from thehoosier.com. Obviously, Indiana loses out on Chris Liedlam, one of their absolutely top priorities. And so, of course, Indiana fans are going crazy. But there is cause for, I don't want to say, I guess cause for concern, to wonder, because fans have seen so many other teams fill important roles with good players, the caliber that IU needs, and once again, IU is not there. And I'm a little surprised. I said this earlier. Indiana is a program that is trying to get back to being Indiana, and with NIL and the transfer portal, I'm like, oh my gosh, there is nothing that I think that would have set Indiana up easier and faster to reach that, get back there, than with those two elements. And it's not quite there just yet for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I on one hand, you're right insofar as Indiana's got spots to fill. It was clear Chris Ledlam was a priority target for them, and losing out on that recruitment, I think, was undeniably a blow to the offseason. On the other hand, best laid plans don't always come to fruition. It's worth remembering Indiana has already landed 2 impact transfers in this cycle. Indiana has reinforced that front court that obviously lost so much with Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis going away. And the portal is not, the portal's, it sounds simplistic, but it's true. The portal's not shut. Now, this is one of those 6 1/2 dozen things. On the one hand, Indiana has added some guys that I think are going to help, some guys that I think fit, and some guys that I think are going to play meaningful roles next season. On the other hand, Indiana's missed on enough of those players that it wanted that you sort of look at it and say, you better shift your focus and find another. You better find kind of another sort of priority target to fill some of those roles fast, because the portal is always a moving feast. As you said, a lot of guys are off the board. It's also worth saying there are guys that maybe haven't entered the portal yet. It's always possible that more players will enter the portal that you didn't know would be options or opportunities. Ledlam was a tough beat. I don't think there's any way around that. I think it was clear that Indiana prioritized him, saw him as a really sort of strong piece of its off-season plans, and to lose him to Tennessee was a blow. It doesn't detract from what Indiana had already done in the portal, adding Peyton Sparks and Khalil Ware, and it also doesn't, it's worth saying, prevent Indiana from coming up with some other plan going forward. But like I said, best laid plans don't always work out. You can go in and say these are our priorities, and we're gonna show them all the NIL opportunities, and we're gonna promise them all the playing time, and blah blah blah. They might still find something they want more somewhere else. And so what you've got to be able, a lot of times in this sport and in that business, coaching, you're defined less by your ability to lay those plans and more by your ability to adjust and move on from them. And so that's the challenge for Indiana now.
I guess the biggest question then is, has Indiana basketball and Mike Woodson shown these guys, these veteran players that are in the portal, that Indiana can win, that you can win at Indiana? Has he shown that yet? I know that they're much better than they were in the previous 6 seasons. They've made the tournament 2 years in a row now, winning one tournament game. But is this the place that's looked at that where you can go and win? Is that the thing that's holding them back? Because it certainly is not NIL. It's certainly not the resources. It's certainly not anything else, because you're going to be seen as much as any place playing for Indiana and at Indiana. So I have to start paring it down. All right, what is the difference maker for these guys? I wonder, is Indiana looked at as a place where you can win that?
You're not going to win every recruitment, though. I mean, like that's.
Well, I don't know. I get that. Absolutely.
No, I'm not suggesting you think they're going to bat 1,000. I mean, it's you're not going to win every one of them, and even if you've shown, I mean, like Nick Timberlake is probably a good example. I mean, he was a guy Indiana was in on. He turned out to be a guy that basically everybody was in on. UConn wanted him, North Carolina wanted him. I think Kansas is where he eventually wound up. The point is, you can have established all those things. You can say we've got good NIL opportunities. We've got tons of minutes for you. We've put guys in the pros. In UConn's case, we are literally the reigning national champion, and he still goes somewhere else. Like not every recruiting decision or transfer decision has to be sort of a referendum on the state of a program. Now, listen. Until Indiana wins its next Big Ten title, goes to its next Final Four, those questions are always going to be asked because it's Indiana and because of the nature of its recent history. I think Mike Woodson has certainly done a lot of good for his reputation and his program's reputation in his first 2 seasons, gotten Indiana back to the tournament twice, gotten Indiana to a place where it's putting guys in the first round of the NBA draft, where it's got All-Americans, where players are winning Big Ten awards and things like that, where you're looking at Indiana and you're saying, I want to be part of the Indiana team that's playing Kansas, or I saw what Indiana did in that environment at Purdue. I can go be a part of that. I think all that helps. It doesn't mean you're going to win every time you step up. And it also doesn't mean that every time you lose a recruit, it's because there's something fundamentally wrong with your program. And so I think I'm not trying to say that like Indiana is fine for not getting Chris Ledlum. It's clear he was a player the staff had identified as a real priority for them this offseason. And in an offseason where I think everyone understood internally and externally, Indiana was going to have to rebuild through the portal. That Indiana kind of went all in on a pretty experienced roster last year, knowing Trace Jackson Davis. Saw that from day one as his last year of college, knowing Miller Kopp and Race Thompson were done after last season. And probably, at least at some point, having a pretty good idea that Jalen Hood-Schifino was the sort of player that might wind up being one and done. You sprinkle into that any portal attrition, and you were going to know that you were going to need to go into the portal to reinforce your roster. And so when you take losses in the portal, it hurts. But on the other hand, like I said, not every recruitment that you miss out on means there's something fundamentally flawed.
But there has to be something, because you look at other programs like North Carolina and the horrible season they had last year, and yet they – second year in a row, they're not having any problem filling the need that they.
Well, need. Again, though, they wanted Nicholas Timberlake, and he went somewhere else. I'm not saying they're not going to lose, but they also got. They did get a nice piece for where they needed. Not that Indiana has it with Khalil Ware. He's great. That's perfect. That's a great TJD replacement of sorts. But Louisville, look at Louisville, how bad they were, and they've got like the number 7 class, and of course Kentucky. I don't even want to talk about that. They've got 4 players inside the damn top 11, I think. So it's the strength is. I just haven't seen the strength. They've gotten some good gets, of course, with Jalen Hood-Schifino and Malik Renew, but
it's just I'm not seeing the consistency yet. But I don't know everything. I agree. You're not going to get everything. My gosh, there's no way because you have to swing and you have to swing at a lot of them. But they're not getting as many as I would have thought because, like I said, I thought Indiana is set up as well as anyone to recover through this with the portal and NIL and all of the resources that go along with that. And it's here and it's been hit or miss, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say the programs you're talking about are the ones that aren't going to have trouble also selling NIL opportunities to recruits, whether it's portal recruits or freshmen, high school recruits. When you're talking about the Kentuckys, the North Carolinas, whatever, those are the ones that you shouldn't maybe be having. Those are the ones that won't have trouble basically telling their own story through NIL and things like that. Now, obviously, it's a little different when it's Chris Ledlam in Tennessee. Transfers are also just different. Guys who have less time to play are going to be maybe more mature about, I want this specific kind of role and I want this opportunity because I only have a finite amount of time. There's a lot less sort of projection, and maybe if I go here, I'll develop and I can do this, and a lot more sort of I need to be with somewhere where I'm comfortable from day one, just sort of boom, I go. I'm not disputing that Indiana, is staring at year 3 under Mike Woodson with a ton of questions. I'm not arguing that at all. Like you bring up North Carolina. North Carolina is also a team that didn't make the NCAA tournament last year. And okay, you can say, well, that should make it easier for Indiana to recruit against North Carolina. Maybe, but it's also sometimes easier to sell kids on the idea, well, look, it's a clean slate. You can come in here and get whatever you want because.
But Indiana has that too because they have so much open. There are so many minutes to offer for those guys. That's another perfect scenario for Indiana to sell.
Like I said, you don't win every one. They're 2 or 3 right now. The 3 that they really clearly kind of went all in on were Chris Ledlam, Kalel Ware, and Peyton Sparks. They're batting, 2 for 3. They probably need to add at least 2 more players. We'll kind of see where that develops and who winds up, kind of coming into the frame for those spots. I know there's been talk about Dalton Connect. My understanding is they've been in touch with Cormac Ryan, the Notre Dame transfer, who I think is going through the NBA process right now too.
Well, he's already committed to North Carolina.
Oh, did he? Did I miss that? Yeah. I've been off the last couple of days. There you go. Well, then I don't know how serious that got, but I think their desire was Dalton Connect. Now, if you can't get him on campus, then you can't get him involved.
That's another problem. They were not able to do that. What's up next for you? I know you've got the Little 5 this weekend.
Yeah, that's been my. I've been off. I've been taking some vacation this week, just getting ready for trying to fill off the honey-do list after the season, and we're recognizing that the portal doesn't slow down, but at very least it allows me a little bit of flexibility. And then, the race this weekend, and then back at it on Monday. Can't be on vacation forever.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you have to have one. Dylan Sinn's going to come up with us next. You guys probably haven't seen each other since the last IU basketball game.
Probably right.
Zach, I appreciate you, brother. You have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star joining us. Wishing him good luck at the Little 5 this weekend. Up next, Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette will join us. And look forward to talking to you, brother. It's back with more from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
I was going to bring you in there for a second, but Zach doesn't stop talking. He's a talker.
Zach's he's a really good interview for that reason. So.
Oh no, he is. Zach, God, do I miss Terry? Terry. Oh my God. Terry Hutchins. Oh, do I miss him? Oh my God. He was the greatest. I I would have him on, and it took me so long. I'm like, for a year, I'm like, this guy hates me. He can't stand me. He had such dry humor, and he was just deadpan all the time. It's like he never broke character, and you could just not. It was actually, I look back, it was great. God, do I miss him? But I would have him on. I could ask him a question, get up, walk away, go make a cup of coffee, put some creamer in it, put it in the microwave, warm it up, and come back, and he's still answering the same question.
I actually had him. I had him as a sports writing professor when I was at IU in 2015.
Oh, you were so lucky.
Yeah, it was great.
God dang it. I was so fortunate. He took me under his wing, and we rode to a lot of games together. In the vehicle he was in.
Yeah.
God,
I remember when that news came in. It was like it came in through the news.
I saw something, and I'm like,
day, man.
What? I'm like, what? Accident. I'm like, and I could figure it out, but it wasn't an accident. I mean, yeah, he hit someone.
Yeah.
But
All right, guys, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
welcome back, Indiana Sports Speed Radio, coming to you here on this Friday. Ready for the weekend. It's not going to be all that great weather-wise in and around the central Indiana area. Went from 80 degrees yesterday. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette joined me now. Dylan, it was 80 degrees yesterday, and today, of course, its high is going to be in the 50s with rain expected through tonight. Tomorrow, a high of 54. So that roller coaster continues here in central Indiana weather-wise. Dylan's up in Fort Wayne, which that's close to the frozen tundra. How are things up there?
It was actually very nice yesterday here too, and you can kind of tell if you're looking at me. I'm a little bit sunburned because I played golf yesterday, and
Whoa.
so I have I have a reminder of the fact that it was warm and sunny yesterday, and it is. I'm looking out my window right now, and it is pouring rain and looks miserable. So you're absolutely right. It is the roller coaster continues.
Speaking of golf, that reminds me, and we'll have to start getting this up. Mark this on your calendar, people. For those of you that are golfers, if you're close enough, June 8th, that is a Thursday, at the golf club at Eagle Point. Not at the studios, just at the golf club at Eagle Point, just south of Bloomington, will be the annual Never Lose Hoop golf outing for the Hulls Foundation, which raises money for kids affected by cancer. Golf scramble at golf club at Eagle Point. It's only $125 a man. Last year was big. This year's going to be bigger because it's kind of funny. I got involved with it last year for the first time, but the first thing I noticed was J.C. Hulls and Joni, they started this a long time ago, Jordan's parents. And JC was just such a busy guy, running camps for Adidas and doing all this stuff. And when I saw the date, and I could tell, I'm like, dude, you need help. JC, we're friends. And I know the first thing I noticed, Dylan, was the date was the same day as the last day of Mike Whitson's basketball camp. And I'm like, that's not good. So the first thing this year, I was like, okay, here are the dates for the camps. Do not pick these dates. So June 8th, Thursday, mark it down on your calendar. It is the Never Lose Hoop golf outing. And you can just come out if you want. You know what? I may set up a thing just if you want to just go to the dinner. We'll have a silent auction that will be online. Anybody can participate in that. So there will be some cool things on there. And we are expecting plenty of players that you will recognize. we'll wait till we get closer to that to talk about. Also, the event, that annual event at Huber's, that is also going to be taking place on, I believe it is a Wednesday, May 31st, down there at Huber's Orchard Winery and Vineyards is the official name. They're in Starlight, Indiana. But that annual event taking place where the coaches go down, Mike Whitson, Tom Allen, Terry Morin, Jeff Mercer, Sean DeStant. I don't know who all they'll have down there. In addition to Scott Dolson, I'm sure will be there. And this thing, it sells out every year. And I don't know how many people are there, Dylan, but have you ever been down to that?
I have not. No, it's every year. I remember because last year that was when Mike Woodson made his public pitch for Trace to come back. It was like, Trace is the missing piece. We really need him. And so every year it seems like there's some kind of news that comes out of that. But no, I've never actually been there.
Well, it is most likely the next time we will be able to speak to Mike Woodson face to face. That's another great thing about the event at Huber's. The last time we have spoken to him was the end of the NCAA tournament. And so, we go from the end of March until the end of May. So 2 months without getting to talk to him. And then it'll be a while after that. But we will get to speak with both Tom Allen and Mike Whitson. And speaking of Tom Allen, I haven't mentioned this yet today, but man, what a loss for IU football as Travell Mullen hits the portal for Indiana in this second open window period. I don't think he'll be the last, but that's a huge, huge loss in a number of ways. Just the name, when you lose a name like that, he was a 4-star player, obviously brother of Taiwan Mullen, and has another brother that's playing in the NFL, cousins to Lamar Jackson. That's a tough loss for Indiana, man, because that was a unit that Indiana had expected big things out of last year, and it kind of let them down. And then now to lose that piece coming into this season, that's not good. And of course, that's the beginning. There will be others that hop in that portal, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not good. Obviously, you never want to lose a guy that you really wanted as a recruit, and who was a 4-star kid, and who has a lot of talent. But I don't know how bad it is, just because if he's leaving now, that suggests to me that he wasn't going to get a ton of playing time in the fall. And we know
which he did not play last year much. So
he did not play last year either. So my question is it possible
that he didn't ever play on a team like that?
Right. Maybe he just wasn't physically ready last year, and maybe he wouldn't have been physically ready this year. And maybe he thought there were other teams that thought differently of him, and he's going to go there. But my question is it possible that he just wasn't going to play, and that's because of how good that unit has a chance to be? Obviously, we have no idea how good it will be, but they have some pieces there, and maybe he looked around and said, the depth chart is such that I'm probably not going to get a shot to play this fall. I don't want to burn a year of eligibility after taking my red shirt last year. I'll go elsewhere. And I mean, would that be the worst thing in the world if a guy as talented as Travell Mullen was not able to get on the field for IU this fall? I mean, and obviously, again, you don't want to lose a guy like that because he was a 4-star kid. You do think he is going to be a very, very good player someday. But in terms of the outlook for this fall, I don't necessarily know that it's the worst thing in the world, because it's not like, well, his brother's gone. He was obviously going to leave. Well, if that was the case, he would have done that in January, right? He went through spring ball with IU. You don't do that unless you were planning on playing next year and you had wanted to stick around. My guess is guys that leave now are almost exclusively a position coach left after the last portal window, or playing time, right? Because you don't go through spring ball with a team and then decide I don't like the culture here, right? So I that would be my guess, is that it was a playing time thing, which again is not the worst thing in the world.
There's no way there's any kind of culture issue, because his brother Taiwan loves Indiana, loves Tom Allen, and I'm sure that's the same with Travell. It's exactly what you said, and this is a kid that had offers from a lot of big-time schools.
Yes. He was a top 300 recruit. He was one of IU's best recruits they've gotten in the last few years.
So he can either do a couple of things. Maybe get an NIL deal for himself someplace. Don't know if that had anything to do with it. I doubt it, since you haven't done anything. But maybe closer back to home, warmer weather. After a year in Bloomington, maybe he says, yeah, Tallahassee is I like Tallahassee a little better, or wherever the case may be. I'm not saying Florida State, but I'm just picking one out. So there's that. But it's a big hit for Indiana football when, that's just going to be tough. We've been talking about Indiana basketball all day. How about former Pacer Malcolm Brogdon, now with the Celtics, named Sixth Man of the Year, which is a big-time award. He adds that to his Rookie of the Year honor from this 16-17 season, which I'd have to go back. How many have won that award? Rookie of the Year and best six man is pretty good. But he's only the third Celtic to get it. And get this. This award started, I guess, in 83 maybe, because the Celtics would win the next three after that, winning 3 out of the first 4 awards, with McHale winning the first 2 in 84 and 85, and then Bill Walton in 86. But they've gone 37 years since then without winning this award, until the former Pacer, Malcolm Brogdon, is his brother not in the transfer portal? Or is he committed someplace yet?
I'm not sure, actually. All I remember is that when Malcolm Brogdon was at Virginia, it was right at the start of when Tony Bennett was getting things going at Virginia. And Malcolm Brogdon was one of the first guys that was like, oh, this is a Virginia guy. This is what we can expect when these Virginia guys hit the league. And I don't think people really expected a whole lot of him. He was not a particularly high draft pick. And I just remember being like, oh, you can go from that system to the NBA and have success. I think people were skeptical of that beforehand. And I think he was kind of proof of concept for that Virginia system.
Yeah, every time I hear Tony Bennett, I even to this day, I cannot just not think of and want to hear somebody singing. He should have called himself Anthony Bennett or something. But who's the most disappointing team? Who's the most disappointing NCAA team in the last, is it 5 years? We could just do 5 years. In the last 5 years, possibly 10, but in the last 5 years, though, or 7, it's a battle between Virginia and Purdue on who is the absolute most disappointing team in the NCAA tournament. I know Purdue has lost their last 3 losses, average to like a 14 seed or 15 seed or something.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a hard thing to accomplish.
It is. Hey, so here's the thing. Virginia is interesting because we have a lot of evidence that Virginia's system is it's tough to win in the NCAA tournament because they shorten the game so much. They let a lot of other teams. That basically the way it works is you shorten the game, you let lesser teams hang around, right? Even no matter how good you are. And
it's kind of like playing against the option. It's like playing against the option in football. You don't see it. You're not. It's not an offense that you're against very often. That you have to defend, have to play. They changed the entire tempo of the game, which is, and it's like I said, it's like playing against the option. It's that different.
Right, and you get fewer possessions, so the game is shorter. The variance is higher in who's going to win those games, and over a long season, that's going to even out. You're going to win a lot of games because you know the system, but in the tournament, when it's one and done, it's tough. And so Virginia has a lot of early tournament losses, but they have that one title, right? They have the title, and that title was lucky. The fact that they were able to beat Purdue in that Elite Eight game. With the ball in the backcourt.
Isn't it funny that this conversation is absolutely about them and comes down, and the dividing line is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think if that game goes the other way, I think we think of Purdue the way we currently think of Virginia, which is a team that comes up short in March every once in a while. But man, they have that ring, because I think they would have won the title. I think Carson Edwards was on such a heater in that tournament. I think they would have gone on and won the title. And so but Virginia was lucky to win that game. They were lucky to beat Auburn in the semifinal, where Kyle Guy had to go make the 3 free throws with no time left when they were down by 2. Like, there's a lot of evidence that Virginia's system doesn't really work in the tournament, but they have that title, so you can't really say anything about them. Purdue, I mean, they made the Sweet 16 last year, right? Losing to St. Peter's is in the Sweet 16 is not the same as losing to St. Peter's in the first round. Now, should they have beaten St. Peter's in the Sweet 16? Yes, absolutely, they should have. Is that a failure of coaching by Matt Painter that they weren't able to get them over the line? Yes. Is it a failure of coaching by Matt Painter that they were not able to beat Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round this year? Absolutely. They should have won that game, and there's really no excuse for that. And so I think if you're talking about the most disappointing team of the last 5 years or so, I think it has to be Purdue. I don't really think there's any other way around that. My contention with Purdue, as someone who covers them, and we can talk more about this, don't sleep on Purdue for next season. I think Purdue is going to
take a break, and let's take a break right there then, and that's a good stopping point. And we'll come back and talk about that, because Purdue or Maryland and Michigan State. We'll talk about that. Who's gonna reign in the Big Ten next year? We'll talk about that and more. Dylan Sinn's with me right now from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. We've got more coming up from BB's Market here on this Friday, right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Oh, it's okay. Don't it's connected.
Yeah.
Finally have something for you. Awesome. It's connected here, but not someplace else.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I
hadn't heard.
He won't come.
It was a bad week.
Yes, it was. Graduation. What the hell is this? They just handed me a BB's order list of stuff you can have. Oh, if you're planning graduation. Oh, there you go.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's it. If you're planning graduation.
Yeah.
Holy stuff. This, pulled pork, half pan, pulled pork, a full pan. Now, how much is a pan? How much is a pan?
Should be on there.
No, I mean, how much?
Well, this is a half pan.
I use pounds, man. I'm still a Puritan.
All right, guys.
Oh,
we go live.
Double that is a full pan.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this absolutely gorgeous Friday in Bloomington as the rain falling and the clouds overhead. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette with me now, and will be with us weekly as we are set on May 30th, I believe, to join the Fort Wayne radio market. Looking forward to that. So Dylan will be on with us, as he has been previously, as frequently as we can have him on, as long as he's not starting a game, the starting pitcher for the Tin Caps.
That's exactly right.
How's the Tin Caps going, man?
It's not bad. They have a really, really talented team this year. By some metrics, the most talented team in minor league baseball in terms of the number of top 30 prospects they have within their organization. They have one of the best prospects in baseball here with Jackson Merrill, the shortstop, who is just turned 20 and is a fantastic hitter, cannon of an arm, first-round pick. So they haven't gotten off to a great start in the wins and losses column, but they are so talented. They have a lot of confidence, and it should be a fun summer here in Fort Wayne.
Looking forward to that and having Dylan on with us often. Before I forget, the Justin here at BB's just handed me, for all those that are in the area, the Bloomington area, as graduation is coming up and you're planning your party, man, they have got the complete list of items that will take care of everything you need, whether it's pulled pork, a half pan, a full pan. And I'm like, how much is a half? Well, that is a half pan. So guess what? 2 of those or double that is a full pan, obviously. So whatever you need, smoked wings, campfire smoking good. Oh, man. Pulled pork, chicken, pulled that, all that, everything, beef brisket. Oh, making me hungry. And then, of course, all the sides, slaw, potato salad, bacon ranch potato salad, broccoli, golders. Oh, great stuff. You know where to get it, BB's Market, right here in Bloomington. Dylan Sinn. Yes. Next year, the Big Ten, you think, your last comment was don't sleep on Purdue next year. Well,
yes, I have
obviously they win the Big Ten this year, and they lose nothing. And their biggest issue was their inexperienced guards, which have gained experience. So they should be better. And if the Big Ten regular season and Big Ten tournament champion is better, they are the de facto favorite going into the next season, without question. But as weird as that sounds, I don't think that Purdue was as dominant as their record seemed. They won a lot of games because people just could not stop Zach Edey, couldn't figure that out. And some teams were able to defend the guards well enough that it just neutralizes Zach Edey. And I think next year that will be the case, that more people, even though the guards will be better for Purdue, that other teams also know what they have to do. You're not going to stop Zach Edey. Forget about that. Why don't waste your time, your energy, and screw the rest of your game plan up by trying to do it? You're not. But you have to stop the rest. He's not scoring 70 points a game. Therefore, Purdue cannot win on his points alone. You have to focus elsewhere. That can still be done, but I agree that Purdue should be better, and they should be the de facto favorite. But Maryland is sneaking in there because they were a good team last year. They could not win on the road to save their life, but they have done nothing but continue to add pieces. They've got good recruits coming in already, and you got Kevin Willard doing a good job there. They may be the secret favorite, and obviously Michigan State continues to pick up good players. Xavier Booker from Indianapolis Cathedral heading there, and Tom Izzo does what he always does. And look, what he did this year, back in making a good run from a low seed. Those are the 3 teams that for me, that's how you have to look at. Dark horse, Ohio State.
Yes. Oh, okay. All right. So Ohio State, a lot of it depends on Sensabaugh and what he decides, right? He has not decided whether he's going to go in the draft or not. I do think they have some interesting pieces. I love Bruce Thornton for Ohio State, so I think you're right about them as a dark horse. Michigan State, the most important part of their offseason so far has been Tyson Walker saying he's coming back. I love Tyson Walker. He's an incredible player. The guy shoots the ball 40 feet in the air every time, and it always goes in. Here's what I'll say about Purdue as someone who covered them this year. You're absolutely right that the weakness was the guards, right? Fletcher Loyer and Braden Smith did not get it done late in the season. Part of that was because they got tired at the end of the year, quite frankly. I think Fletcher Loyer got tired and lost his legs a little bit about the 2/3 mark of the season. Fletcher Loyer is a kid who played up here in Fort Wayne for 2 years at Homestead. He's a fantastic shooter. He is a great scorer. At the end of the season, he was neither of those things. He lost his ability to shoot from the outside, essentially. Here's what I'll say about that. I do not think that will happen next year. I think Fletcher Loyer was one of the best players on the court when Purdue went up there to Portland and beat Duke in the Phil Knight Legacy, and they won that tournament. They beat Gonzaga and Duke on back-to-back nights. Fletcher Loyer is one of the best players on the court in both of those games. I think that he is going to have an offseason where he gets in the gym. I don't think he's going to run into a wall at the 2/3 mark of this season like he did last year. I think that helps. Purdue's biggest issue this year was an inability to shoot from the outside. That is way out of character for a Matt Painter team. It's not something that I think will be repeated. I think Fletcher Lawyer was a big part of that because he struggled so much down the stretch of the regular season. I also think Purdue is adding some really, really interesting pieces. They have Cam Heide and was on the bench this year as a redshirt. Did not play. He was a 2022 recruit for them. Every time we saw that dude in warmups, he was throwing down some kind of 360 windmill dunk. He might have been Purdue's most athletic player on the team this year and did not play. He's also a very, very good three-point shooter.
Is he like a Hannah Mosk Perea?
No, he's like 6'7". He is a very, very good player. And I think he will take some minutes from Ethan Morton at the 3 this year. Then you bring in Miles Colvin, who is also very good out of Heritage Christian. You're getting with those two guys an infusion of athleticism, which is something that Purdue missed last year. I think that you add those guys, you get Smith and Lawyer a year stronger. We don't know yet what's going to happen with Edey, if he's going to be back. I'm not one of these guys that thinks Purdue is going to be better if Zach Edey leaves. That's obviously untrue. He's the most dominant player.
Oh, God, no. They will. If Zach Edey left Purdue would not finish in the top 6.
I don't know about that, Jim. I don't know because
there's no way.
Of the offense ran through Zach Edey. And when he was taken out of the game, even remotely, those other guys really didn't have a great handle on what to do. And some of that is coaching.
That sounds like IU. That's exactly right. The IU problem. IU had a problem with the shooting because I think everything ran. It was just Jalen Hood, Shafino, and Trace Jackson Davis. Everything else was accidental.
Right. And that's not to say those guys aren't great players, because they are. But when someone dominates the ball to that extent and your job every possession is to get the ball to Zach, your own game is going to atrophy a little bit. It's just the reality. It's just what happens. And so I think if Edey left, Purdue also has some real depth up there at 5. I think, and this is my Fort Wayne bias coming out, I think Caleb Furst is a great player. I think he would step in and play the 5 if they needed him to. I think he'd be great. I think that Trey Kaufman-Wren really showed some ability last year. He's a good back-to-the-basket scorer. He needs to work on his passing out of the post, but I think he can get there. And I think their team would survive and possibly thrive without Zach Edey. Do I think they'd win the Big Ten without him? No, but I think they'd still be an NCAA tournament team, and then you're kind of you're a year ahead, and the year after you'd be really good because you have Will Berg coming in as well. I look at Purdue's roster, despite what happened this year, I see a lot of reasons for optimism for them in the next couple of years. And so that my point all offseason has been, get your jokes off on Purdue now, because I think they have an extremely bright future in the next couple of years here. I do not think that NCAA tournament streak that they've been on that has been so tough for their fans will continue. I do not think that is the case.
One of the reasons I completely disagree is, first of all, is because you take Zach Edey's 30 points a game out and his guaranteed 12 to 14 rebounds out. That's just something that they would not make up for. But not only that, it was how they beat teams because of him. That changes, and that changes for what other teams are allowed to do to Purdue. So that's another reason why I disagree on that. And then I'll go to the fact that you have to have just elite athletes if you're going to win. You can win during the conference season and you can win a game, but if we're talking about winning, what UConn did, winning the national championship, what Miami did, getting to where they got to with their team, those guys all were high-level athletes that played at the highest level every time. That's something that Indiana didn't have. They did not have guys that played to the elite level every time they played. And that doesn't mean they have to score 30 points. That means you're just trying to score 30 points. the effort is what I'm talking about. It just was not there every time. And you're not going to win games if you don't have that. I don't care who you have on your team, because everybody else is trying to beat your ass. Like Northwestern. Northwestern was a team that had to play so hard every game or they were going to lose, because they just did not have enough great players to beat you. But they had enough that if you didn't play hard enough, they would beat your ass. And they did that to Indiana twice, because they just simply outplayed them.
Yeah, that was the thing, is I think Purdue played that way at the start of last season, and I think that they just had such a young team last year, at least in the backcourt, that those guys got tired as the season went on, and they weren't able to kind of give that same effort late in the year. I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward. I do think that the biggest issue is athleticism for Purdue, and in their next two classes, they bring in Miles Colvin, Cam Heide will be off the bench, and Cannon Catchings is coming in 2024. Not to mention Jack Benter, who broke a backboard in a high school game this year. So Matt Painter looked around at that roster, and even before last season, he knew what the weakness was, and he went out and fixed it, and he'd already fixed it. And so I do think that they're going to get an infusion of athleticism, and I do think that that will kind of complement the roster they had this year. Obviously, if Edey does not come back, I don't think that they are any kind of Final Four contender next year. I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten. But I do think that they would be able to, because that's the thing, is Matt Painter has, and you can say what you want about Matt Painter and the failures that Purdue has had in March. The dude can coach. And he has changed, like we talk about the Matt Painter system, and it's big guys, and it's skill on the outside, but he's changed his stripes significantly depending on the personnel. He is not a type of guy who is going to try to fit the players in a box and just do one thing around here, one thing and one thing only. They will change their system. They will emphasize what works. And I think they'll be not good. They would love to have Edey back, but they will be okay if he leaves. It will not devastate next year's team.
Who's your baseball team? You have a baseball team?
I'm a Cubs fan, so things are pretty good right now. It's surprisingly going surprisingly well.
Yeah. We've got I love that we have a great mix. Lee just booed you, by the way. Got a Cardinals fan over here next to me. Tons of Cardinals fans that listen to the show. Well, first of all, the 97.7 The Ref down in Evansville, one of the stations that we're on, carries the Cardinals, the Cardinal games. So in Evansville is that Cardinals area. I get it. Kind of Louisville is a dividing line. From there over, more Reds. I'm a Reds fan. We've got Rick Bozich on. He's a White Sox fan. Let's see. Kyle Nedrip is a Detroit Tigers fan. I'm trying to think of everybody. We've got a good mix, but not a lot of winners. The White Sox they're stinking it up. The Reds are the Reds. The Cardinals are in the basement, baby. What the hell is going on in St. Louis? But
that bad mojo from signing Wilson Contreras away from the Cubs.
Oh yeah, and K-Bro. We got K-Bro, who's a Mets fan, and there's somebody else on here that's a Mets fan. I've drawn a fact. But and speaking of the Mets, how about Max Scherzer? 10-game suspension. A little foreign substance on his hand. He said it was rosin and sweat, but they made him wash it off with alcohol, which he did. The umpire goes about later. His hands are worse than they were before. So it's like, but here's of the 3 suspensions this year for that substance on a hand by a pitcher, same umpire.
Yeah.
So there's that. What's up for you this weekend, brother?
I will be in South Bend. It is the Notre Dame spring football game. So I will have that.
They didn't have theirs. That's surprising. I thought that would have been over.
Yeah, no, this is it for them. So that will be tomorrow. And so we'll get to see, this will be the first time the public will get to see Sam Hartman in a Notre Dame uniform out there flinging passes around. So very exciting day for Notre Dame, and we'll see how that goes. It's gonna be a fun season in South Bend this fall. This is kind of the first look at it.
Looking forward to that. Oh, I forgot. We have a few minutes left here. the Reds, my team, I'm thankful to the Cardinals right now. They're not in the basement, but I think the Reds are probably just going to be a 50-50 team all year. Damn. But how about Indiana?
They've been the last few years.
Yeah. How about Indiana baseball? They're on another heater. They've won 4 straight. They are tied. They're leading the Big Ten. Technically, they've got more wins, but it's a percentage. They're behind Nebraska, I think, but playing really well. Back-to-back wins over Louisville and Cincinnati. Louisville ranked number 12, great RPI builder, and then they go to Cincinnati and win. Had to hold on for that one, man. They dominated that game, had 7-run leads twice, go into the 9th leading 11-4, I think, and they give up 5 hits and 5 runs on 5 hits, strand the 2 tying runners, and Indiana's able to get out of there 11-9. But that's getting it close there, man.
Yeah. By the way, if we have a few minutes left here, let me make a plea to the listeners who are IU fans on this radio show. Okay, so IU needs a big wing for the basketball team next year. Is looking. That's kind of what Chris Ludlam was going to be. They need 2. That you're right. Okay. Look at Brandon Newman from Purdue. That's all I want to say. He would be absolutely perfect for that spot. And I've said this on Twitter, and I've had IU fans say,
is he in the portal?
He is in the portal. And IU fans have complained they don't want Purdue castoffs. And here's what I'll say about that. Brandon Newman.
Why would you give a crap where anybody comes from?
I agree.
Actually, in my thinking, if I were looking at it as a fan, it would be reversed for me. I'd say, oh, come on.
Yes.
Now, come on. We'd love to have that. And look at Purdue football. There are 3 former IU football players on their roster. Well, if they're still on their roster, what's his name, who changed his mind like 16 times, the running back, who am I thinking of?
Samson James is no longer on the roster.
Yes, committed to Ohio State, came to Indiana, went in the portal, back out of the portal, been back in the portal now, and then you go to Purdue of all places. But they've got 2 other guys up there as well. So yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't give her. That would be more of a drive for me personally.
I agree with you. And as someone who has covered both of these teams, look, Brandon Newman is transferring from Purdue, not because he would not have played next year, but because he wasn't going to start or at least play 30 minutes a game next year because he's going to split time with Ethan Morton. He wanted to play 30 minutes a game. IU can give him that. And Brandon Newman is a dang good player. He only averaged about 6 points a game last year, but he shot about 38% from 3-point range 2 years ago. He has gotten much, much better as a defender since then. Thank you, Michael. You're exactly right. I think Mike Woodson would turn him into the most potential. Like, he would reach his potential under Mike Woodson. He is a great defensive player at this point, extremely athletic, knows what he's doing on the basketball court, has the type of offensive game that IU is missing right now, which is a guy who can get his own shot off the dribble. And he's just a guy that is incredibly, incredibly competitive. And at Purdue over the last 2 years, we've seen that he is willing to play a role. And I think that I just think that if IU is not like looking at him, especially after Ledlum went to Tennessee, I think if IU is not kicking the tires on that, they're making a mistake, because he is the type of guy that would fit exactly where they need right now.
A lot of times I really wonder if IU is looking at the right guys sometimes, but that's above my pay grade. Man, it has been a great one today. I cannot thank Dylan Sinn enough from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. What's up next for you, quickly?
Yeah, I'll be in South Bend tomorrow, and then obviously back with the Tin Caps the rest of the summer.
And with us as well. Looking forward to it as we will be joining 1380, 107.5 FM up in Fort Wayne soon. And a great day to you guys, the Region Rats, listening up on WJOB 1230 AM and 104.7 FM. Everybody down in Evansville on the Ref 97.7, always the right call. Or on YouTube around the world. Appreciate everybody. And hope you have a great weekend. Big thanks to everybody on the program today. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star. Alec Busse from thehoosier.com. Make sure you go to thehoosier.com and get up to date on all your IU news. Thanks to RC for sitting in for John, the producer, who's on assignment. And for us, you guys, I hope you have a great weekend. Until Monday, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
And